right, let's go to Ruth. And we're going to be in chapter 3. We're going to pick up. Now, last week, as we began this, we discussed the fact that the book of Ruth is taking place during the times of the judges. And in particular, it's taking place at the beginning of that third generation. So the children of Israel cross into the promised land, and they serve the Lord throughout the remainder of the years of Joshua, it says, and then they served the Lord under the elders that overlived Joshua, and then there arose that third generation that knew not the Lord nor the works which he had done. And immediately then Israel apostatized and went after other gods. And that's what the book of Judges records for us. And it's right at the beginning of that time of the book of Judges, in the middle of chapter 3, when the book of Ruth is taking place. And a time of great apostasy, a time of great darkness for the nation of Israel, but this is like a shining light in the midst of that darkness, the book of Ruth is. And so in chapter 1 of the book of Ruth, Elimelech takes his family, Naomi, and then their two sons, Chilion and Mahlon, and they go to Moab. He sells his property, or leases it out technically, goes to Moab with his family, and there in Moab he dies, and then eventually his two sons die after they have married, but they are childless. And so Ruth and Orpah are the in-law daughters, and Orpah remains in Moab. Ruth gets converted and becomes essentially a Jewish proselyte and follows Naomi back to Israel. And in chapter 2, we have Ruth working in the field of Boaz. It says that her hap was to light upon the field that belonged to Boaz, a man of great wealth. So she just, humanly speaking, she just kind of happens to get there. But as we noted, this is all in God's providence. God is working in all these details. He led her providentially to this field, and it was the field of Boaz. And Boaz is going to act as the kinsman redeemer. He is going to be the one qualified by the end of this to repurchase the land for Naomi, and he is going to marry Ruth, who is a Gentile, but she will bear a son that will carry on the name for Elimelech, the firstborn son, which would be Naomi. She bears a son for Naomi, in essence. And so this is kind of where we're at. Naomi notices as Ruth is working in the field of Boaz that Boaz has taken a liking to her. And the text records how he tells Ruth that she can actually glean among the reapers, that she could go to the sheaves and actually take grain out of the sheaves, and they were commanded to leave handfuls of grain on the ground behind them. That way she could glean that as well. And so she is coming back home at the end of this time of harvest with an overabundance of food. And Naomi notices this means whoever this guy is that owns this field, he's really taken a liking to Ruth. And so when she finds out who it is, she's even more excited because she knows that Boaz is near kin to her husband. So that's basically where we're at. And so now we're going to, Naomi, being a good Jewish mother, is going to try to get a marriage arranged here so this can all work out. So she can get the land back, Ruth will have a husband, and everything will work out. So this is where we're at here in chapter 3, and this is where we find love's request, and that request is the marriage proposal. So let's notice here in chapter 3, verse 1, Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said unto her, My daughter, shall I not seek rest for thee, that it may be well with thee? And now is not Boaz of our kindred, with whose maidens thou wast? Behold, he winnoweth barley tonight in the threshing floor. Wash thyself, therefore, and anoint thee, and put thy raiment upon thee, and get thee down to the floor, but make not thyself known unto the man, until he shall have done eating and drinking. And it shall be, when he lieth down, that thou shalt mark the place where he shall lie, and thou shalt go in and uncover his feet, and lay thee down, and he will tell thee what thou shalt do. And she said unto her, All that thou sayest unto me, I will do. Now, to really get an idea of what is going on here, let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 25. And this is a custom called levirate marriage. Levirate is from the Latin for brother. Levir is brother marriage. And what it's speaking of is this idea of a kinsman redeemer, a kinsman marriage. So chapter 25 here of Deuteronomy, and notice down to verse number 5. It says, If brethren dwell together, and one of them die, and have no child, the wife of the dead shall not marry without unto a stranger. Her husband's brother, that's where the Levirate comes from, shall go in unto her and take her to him to wife, and perform the duty of an husband's brother unto her. So now this is a custom, and we're going to look at this after a little bit in Genesis chapter 38. This is a cultural custom that if you have two brothers, one of them gets married, they don't have any kids, and he dies, then the next single brother gets to marry the bride to raise up a child. And that's something that was already a custom, but there's more being placed on it here. The Lord's defining this a little bit more. So notice in verse 6, And it shall be that the firstborn which she beareth shall succeed in the name of his brother which is dead. Okay, now that's important to keep in mind, because this clause right here is going to change the outcome in chapter 4 when we get to chapter 4. Shall succeed the name of his brother which is dead, that his name be not put out of Israel. And if the man like not to take his brother's wife, then let his brother's wife go up to the gate unto the elders and say, My husband's brother refuseth to raise up children, raise up unto his brother a name in Israel. He will not perform the duty of my husband's brother. Then the elders of his city shall call him and speak unto him, and if he stand to it and say, I like not to take her, then shall his brother's wife come unto him in the presence of the elders, and loose his shoe from off his foot, and spit in his face, and shall answer and say, So shall it be done unto the man that will not build up his brother's house. And his name shall be called in Israel, the house of him that hath his shoe loosed. Now, that doesn't sound so bad in English, but I'm sure in Hebrew it probably sounds a little bit gruffer than that. But obviously, this is not something that you want, an epithet that you want. This is something that means you have dishonored your family. You have dishonored your brother. In fact, there's two brothers that are going to be killed in Genesis chapter 38 for this very reason, for dishonoring, or one brother is going to be killed because he dishonors his other brother. So let's go back to chapter 3 of Ruth. So this is what's going on. Boaz is near kin. We're not exactly sure where at in the whole spectrum of kin he falls, but he is the near available kin. And so he is one who is fit. He is qualified to be able to redeem the land as a brother, and he is able to marry, to raise up seed for Elimelech. So that's the point here. That's what all this is about. So let's go down to, so it mentions that that Boaz is going to be in the threshing floor this night. So he winnoweth in the threshing floor. And what winnowing is they would take the grain after they bring it all in and beat it out. They would take the grain, put it in like this, almost like a basket, disc type thing, toss it up into the air, and then the wind would catch it and blow the chaff off of the grain. Well, it was typically a threshing floor was in like a saddleback. You'd have a hill on either side, and so the wind would come down really well and blow this, and two piles would form, one being the wheat, one being the chaff. And then at the end of the harvest, they would light that chaff on fire. And that reminds us of Mark chapter 9, where the chaff will be burned with unquenchable heat. And so that's where that idea comes from. And so during the time of the harvest, the landlords, so to speak, they would go down and they would actually sleep next to the pile of grain, just to make sure nobody comes and tries to take it during the night, because that was illegal. This is kind of their insurance policy, so to speak. So they would go down there, they would sleep by the grain, and so Ruth is supposed to go down now that night while he's sleeping and lay next to him while he's there. Okay, so now here in your notes, here's your first blank. By this point, Naomi has realized that Boaz is near kin and has taken a liking to Ruth. So near kin. For Naomi, this is an opportunity for the land. For Ruth, it is an opportunity for an abundant life. Ruth is to approach Boaz and request that he perform the duty of the Goel. That's Hebrew for kinsman redeemer. So notice here in chapter 3, again in verse number 6, this is where this begins to play out. And she went down onto the floor and did according to all that her mother-in-law bade her. And when Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of corn, and she came softly and uncovered his feet and laid her down. Now this isn't any type of immoral thing that's going on. Basically what she does is, do I have that here? Yeah, I do. Let me finish this and then, so verse 8, and it came to pass at midnight that the man was afraid and turned himself, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. And she said, Who art thou? And she answered, I am Ruth, thine handmaid. Spread therefore thy skirt over thine handmaid, for thou art a near kinsman. So he's laying down there, and he has his kind of his coat on, so to speak. And it wasn't a coat like we think of, but it was a long coat, went all the way down to his feet. And this is what he would cover up with at nighttime. And so Ruth comes down. She picks up the edge of the hem of his coat, the bottom hem, pulls it up, and lays down at his feet. And he's startled when he goes to move around during his sleep and notices, hey, there is somebody right here next to me. And so then he realizes, oh, it's Ruth. And so she requests that he spread his garment, his skirt, over her. And the idea there is the hem of the garment here, and this is your next blank, the hem held the badge of authority. It's the kind of a stamp or the mark that a person would press into something that would typically be on a ring, but they also carry it on the hem of their garment. It would be their personal mark. And what it is a badge of authority. And so when she asks to spread the skirt over her, she's proposing, unlike our culture, she's saying, will you marry me? Will you perform this duty because you're near kin? And we see this with the hem of the garment in different places. You remember David cut off a portion of Saul's garment in Samuel, and that was an area where the hem would have that badge of authority. And so in essence, David stripped Saul of the symbol of his authority at that point, and that's where things really begin to turn for David. Also, the woman that had the issue of blood, remember in the ministry of Jesus, she thought, if I could touch but the hem of his garment, then I'll be made whole. And so that's where that idea comes in. So this is a marriage proposal, but there's a problem. Boaz is thrilled with this idea. He's definitely taken a liking to her, but you can tell at this point he's been doing some figuring himself. Because now watch what happens here, verse 10. And he said, Blessed be thou of the Lord, my daughter, for thou hast showed more kindness in the latter end than at the beginning, inasmuch as thou followest not young men, neither whether poor or rich. So he's noticing her virtue. She's not interested in following after the other guys that she saw in the field. She just went to work. She didn't care whether they were rich or poor. He knows that she's not doing this for money's sake. He says, verse 11, And now, my daughter, fear not. I will do to thee all that thou requirest. For all the city of my people doth know that thou art a virtuous woman. And now it is true that I am thy near kinsman. Howbeit, but, there's a problem. There is a kinsman nearer than I. Uh-oh. This is the problem. Boaz like, I'll do it. I'm more than happy to marry you. I'm more than happy to do everything that you just said, and everybody knows you're a good girl. But unfortunately, there is this one guy he's standing in the way of you and me. Verse 13, notice what he says. Tarry this night, and it shall be in the morning, that if he will perform unto thee the part of a kinsman, well, or fine. Let him do the kinsman's part. But if he will not do the part of a kinsman to thee, then will I do the part of the kinsman to thee. As the Lord liveth, lie down until the morning. So he's promising her, now tomorrow, as soon as we get up, I'm going to work to resolve this. Now what's interesting here is, as we look at the picture of what this whole story presents, it is a picture of the gospel. We have Boaz, a Jew who is in love with a Gentile woman who is going to become his bride, but there's something in the way that has to be satisfied. This nearer kinsman. And I really think this is a perfect picture of the law that has to be satisfied. And you'll notice we go through this, Ruth does not, as she is supposed to, she does not propose him for marriage. Boaz goes in her place to satisfy this demand. He does the work for her. So notice here verse 14. And she lay at his feet until the morning, and she rose up before one could know another, so very early in the morning, just as the sun is barely starting to come up. And he said, Let it not be known that a woman came into the floor, for obvious reasons. If word gets out that a woman was here with me, people are going to talk. That's the point. He wants to protect her reputation. But notice here, and when she and he said, Bring the veil, verse 15, that thou hast upon thee, and hold it. And when she held it, he measured 6 measures of barley, and laid it on her, and she went into the city. And when she came to her mother-in-law, she said, Who art thou, my daughter? And she told her all that the man had done to her. And she said, now notice how this is worded. She said, These 6 measures of barley gave he me, for he said to me, Go not empty unto thy mother-in-law. So who are these 6 measures of barley for? They're for Naomi. So this is a sign for Naomi. This is like a guarantee. Then said she, Sit still. So this is Naomi, my daughter, until thou know how the matter will fall. For the man will not be in rest until he have finished the thing this day. So this is a symbol for her. So here in your next blanks here, the 6 measures of barley, this is a code for Naomi. This was something that a Jewish woman would understand. In the creation, God worked 6 days and rested the 7th. So this was a sign that he would not rest until he has accomplished what he said. So this was a guarantee for Naomi. Ruth wouldn't understand this, but Naomi would understand this. And so this is a sign for her that he is going to take care of this, and he will not rest until he has resolved this issue. Then we come to chapter 4, and this is love's reward. This is where everything finally comes to its conclusion. Notice here verse 1. Then went Boaz up to the gate and sat him down there. And behold, the kinsman of whom Boaz spake came by, unto whom he said, Ho, such a one, turn aside, sit down here. And he turned aside and sat down. So this kind of gives you an indication that Boaz is somewhat of a man of authority. Maybe it's because of his wealth. Maybe he's just a respected man in the community. But he's obviously a man of authority, because notice in verse 2 it says, he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, sit ye down here. And they sat down. And he just grabs, they weren't planning this. This was something that just developed in the night. And he convenes this council of the elders and says, we need to take care of this business right now. That's what's going on here. Verse 3. And he said unto the kinsman, Naomi, that is, come again out of the country of Moab, selleth a parcel of land. So you remember we talked about last week, Elimelech, when he sells off his land, the Jews could not actually sell the land. They basically sold the use of the land. And so this is what's being referred to. Naomi selleth a parcel of land which was our brother Elimelech's. And I thought to advertise thee, saying, buy it before the inhabitants, and before the elders of my people. If thou wilt redeem it, redeem it. But if thou wilt not redeem it, then tell me, that I may know, for there is none to redeem it beside thee, and I am after thee. And he said, I will redeem it. So you can imagine at this point, Boaz just kind of deflates at this point. This is kind of a bummer for him. He likes Ruth. And so now somebody else is kind of stepping up to it, but Boaz has a plan. Because he doesn't just leave it there. Watch what he does. Verse 5. Then said Boaz, now listen, that's in the Hebrew. What day thou buyest the field of the land of Naomi, thou must buy it also of Ruth the Moabitess. Why is that? Well, her husband Mahlon, Ruth's deceased husband, Mahlon, was the firstborn son of Elimelech. So the land rights would have gone to him. So it was sold by Elimelech, but by inheritance it would have been Mahlon's. So he can buy the land of Naomi, but in so doing he also has to buy the land for Ruth, because it would have been by default hers through Mahlon. Does that make sense? Maybe that's a lot of extra. I'm sorry that we're doing this in the afternoon, right after we've eaten. But that's kind of what's going on here. So he says, thou must buy it also of Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of the dead, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance. And notice what he says, verse 6. And the kinsman said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I mar mine own inheritance. Redeem thou my right to thyself, for I cannot redeem it. So here in your notes, Boaz confronts the near kin. He is willing to redeem the land, but he is not willing to have Ruth as a bride. He passes. Well, that's convenient for Boaz, because that's exactly what he was hoping for to begin with. But why can't he buy it? How will he mar his own inheritance? So he has not yet, essentially what he's saying is, I have not yet had a son to pass the inheritance down to. So if I marry Ruth, the firstborn son is the one who is going to carry on the name, but it won't be mine. And the firstborn son gets the inheritance, but it won't be my inheritance. So it's almost as if his land then would pass on if he doesn't have a son. That if the land has to go to somebody else. Sorry. It's very technical. But in essence, he's going to lose his land if he doesn't have another son after the firstborn son. So notice here verse 7. Now this was the manner in former time in Israel concerning redeeming and concerning changing. For to confirm all things, a man plucked off his shoe and gave it to his neighbor, and this was a testimony in Israel. Now notice what it does not say there. There's no spitting in the face. So apparently from the time Moses gave the commandment to this point, they kind of dropped off the whole spitting in somebody's face thing. But For understandable reasons. That would just be disgusting. But so he plucks off his shoe. Verse 8, therefore the kinsman said unto Boaz, buy it for thee. So he drew off his shoe. And Boaz said unto the elders and unto the people, ye are witnesses this day that I have bought all that was Elimelech's, and all that was Chilion's and Mahlon's of the hand of Naomi. Moreover, Ruth, the Moabitess, the wife of Mahlon, have I purchased to be my wife, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance, that the name of the dead be not cut off from among the brethren, and from the gate of his place. Ye are witnesses this day. So Boaz is going to buy the field. He's going to take Ruth as a bride. Mahlon being the firstborn, would have had the right of inheritance, so he's going to carry on his name. But now notice here in verse 11. So here's where we get to the wedding. And all of the people that were in the gate and the elders said, we are witnesses. The Lord make the woman, and now this is really kind of strange. The Lord make the woman that is come into thine house like Rachel and like Leah. Now what do we know about Rachel and Leah? Who came from Rachel and Leah? The 12 tribes. So all of this is prophetic, what's going on here. So he says, the woman is going to be like Rachel. So coming from her, from Ruth, is going to come the true Israel, which is the Messiah. This is the prophecy that's being made here. And that's exactly what we see, because who comes from Ruth and Boaz? Jesse, and then David. And who comes from David's line? Jesus, the Messiah, which according to Isaiah, he is actually referred to as Israel. So he's going to fulfill what Israel failed to do, especially during this period of time. So let her be like Rachel and like Leah, which two did build the house of Israel, and do thou worthily in Ephratah, and be famous in Bethlehem. Is she going to be famous in Bethlehem? Absolutely, because of Jesus. Now this is where it gets really strange. And let thy house be like the house of Pharez, whom Tamar bare unto Judah, of the seed which the Lord shall give thee of this young woman. Really strange. Like Pharez? What do we know about Pharez? Pharez was an illegitimate child from an incestuous relationship. And the whole relationship was based around this principle right here. So let's go to Genesis chapter 38. Let's look at how this all comes about. Because as you're reading through Genesis, this chapter doesn't seem to make much sense. It's really an interruption in the life of Joseph. You have in 37, he's getting put into a pit. In chapter 39, he's going down to Egypt. And then here in chapter 38, it just really seems to interrupt the narrative. It doesn't have anything to do with the life of Joseph. It's just this whole situation with Judah and Tamar. It's just really messed up. Now, watch this. So verse 1, it came to pass at the time that Judah went down from his brethren and turned in to a certain Adullamite whose name was Hira. And Hira saw there a daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua, and he took her and went in unto her. And she conceived and bare a son and called his name And she conceived again and bare a son, and she called his name Onan. Turn the page, sorry. And she yet again conceived and bare a son, and called his name Shelah. And he was at Chizib when she bare him. And Judah took a wife for his firstborn, whose name was Tamar. And Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord slew him. And Judah said unto Onan, go in unto thy brother's wife and marry her. So this is that levirate marriage thing taking place before it was codified in the law. marry her, and raise up seed to thy brother. And Onan knew that the seed should not be his. And it came to pass, when he went in unto his brother's wife, that he spilled it on the ground, lest that he should give seed to his brother. And the thing which he did displeased the Lord. Wherefore he slew him also. Then said Judah to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, Remain a widow at thy father's house, till Shelah my son be grown. For he said, Lest peradventure he die also, as his brethren did. And Tamar went and dwelt in her father's house. And in process of time, the daughter of Shua, Judah's wife, died. And Judah was comforted, and went up unto his sheep shearers to Timnath, he and his friend Hira the Adullamite. And it was told Tamar, saying, Behold, thy father-in-law goeth up to Timnath to shear his sheep. And she put her widow's garments off from her, and covered her with a veil, and wrapped herself. Now what has gone on here is enough time has elapsed for Shelah to grow up, but he has not been given to Tamar yet to be a husband for her. And so now she's going to get back at Judah. You won't give Shelah to me, so I'm going to work this thing out myself, and I'm going to get seed to raise up a son for That's the plan here. Verse 14. She put her widow's garments off from her, covered her with a veil, and wrapped herself, and sat in an open place, which is by the way to Timnath. For she saw that Shelah was grown, and she was not given unto him to wife. When Judah saw her, he thought her to be an harlot, because she had covered her face. And he turned unto her by the way, and said, Go to, I pray thee, let me come in unto thee. For he knew not that she was his daughter-in-law. And she said, What wilt thou give me, that thou mayest come in unto me? This is a really sad commentary on Judah, isn't it? It really kind of gives you the moral character of the patriarchs. And she said, What wilt thou give me, that thou mayest come in unto me? And he said, I will send thee a kid from the flock. And she said, Wilt thou give me a pledge till thou send it? And he said, What pledge shall I give thee? And she said, Thy signet, and thy bracelets, and thy staff that is in thine hand. And he gave it her, and came in unto her, and she conceived by him. And she arose and went away, and laid by her veil from her, and put on the garments of her widowhood. And Judah sent the kid by the hand of his friend the Adullamite to receive his pledge from the woman's hand, but he found her not. Then he asked the men of that place, saying, Where is the harlot? Could you just imagine having this conversation? Just to go around town, there was a whore over here the other day. Can you tell me where she is? And this is crazy stuff. It's just terrible. Verse 21, Where is the harlot that was openly by the wayside? And they said, There was no harlot in this place. And he returned to Judah and said, I cannot find her. And also the men of the place said that there was no harlot in this place. And Judah said, Let her take it to her, lest we be shamed. Behold, I sent this kid, and thou hast not found her. And it came to pass, about 3 months after, that it was told Judah, saying, Tamar thy daughter-in-law hath played the harlot, and also, behold, she is with child by whoredom. Now at this point, they've not made the connection yet between the two. And Judah said, Bring her forth, and let her be burnt. When she was brought forth, she sent to her father-in-law, saying, By the man whose these are, am I with child. And she said, Discern, I pray thee, whose are these, the signet, and bracelets, and staff? Now Judah knows he's caught. Oops. And Judah acknowledged them and said, She hath been more righteous than I, because that I gave her not to Shelah my son. Saying, this is my fault. I didn't keep my word and give her Shelah. So this is my fault. She's been more righteous than I. Goes to show how his righteousness stands. Because that I gave her not to Shelah my son, and he knew her again no more. And it came to pass in the time of her travail that, behold, twins were in her womb. And it came to pass, when she travailed, the one put out his hand, and the midwife took and bound upon his hand a scarlet thread, saying, This came out first. And it came to pass, as he drew back his hand, that behold, his brother came out, and she said, How hast thou broken forth? This breach be upon thee. Therefore his name was called Pharez. And afterward came out his brother that had the scarlet thread upon his hand, and his name was called Zerah. Now what's interesting here as well is Pharez was technically the younger of the two. Zerah came out first and then withdrew his hand. Pharez then comes out, so he's the younger, but as it has been throughout the book of Genesis, the elder shall serve the younger. Now, this Pharez is the illegitimate son of Judah's incest with Tamar, so this is not a toast, okay? This is not a toast. When the people in, turn with me to Deuteronomy 23, but in Ruth, when they're saying, may your son be like Pharez, this isn't a toast, this is a prophecy. Notice here in chapter 23 of Deuteronomy, and you remember I mentioned last week at the beginning that in genealogies that 10th person is always significant. And we're going to see that here again where this becomes important. Notice Deuteronomy chapter 23 verse 2. A bastard shall not enter into the congregation of the Lord, even to his 10th generation shall he not enter into the congregation of the Lord. Okay? Now, what is a bastard? It's an illegitimate son. That's exactly what Pharez was. Okay, now let's go back to Ruth, and let's see how this plays out. So, 10 generations. Notice here in chapter 4, verse 13 of Ruth. So Boaz took Ruth, and she was his wife, and when he went in unto her, the Lord gave her conception, and she bare a son. And the women said unto Naomi, Blessed be the Lord, which hath not left thee this day without a kinsman, that his name may be famous in Israel. And he shall be unto thee a restorer of thy life, and a nourisher of thine old age. For thy daughter-in-law, which loveth thee, which is better to thee than 7 sons, hath borne him. And Naomi took the child, and laid it in her bosom, and became nurse unto it. And the women, her neighbors, gave it a name, saying, There is a son born to Naomi, and they called his name Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. Now, I want you to notice here in these last verses, and this is where we see the point of the book of Judges and the book of Ruth. They really go together. Ruth is almost like the appendix of the book of Judges. So, the book of Judges, the emphasis is Israel must have a king. The emphasis of the book of Ruth now is that they have to have the right king, because Saul is of the tribe of Benjamin, but the kingly line is supposed to be Judah. So Saul can't be the rightful, legitimate king, nor is he a righteous king. What they need is a king that is a man after God's heart. That's what they need. And he has to come from the tribe of Judah. So now let's look at this. This is what these last verses are all about. Notice, now these are the generations of who? Pharez. And count the names. Pharez begat Hezron. Hezron begat Ram. Ram begat Amminadab. And Amminadab begat Naasson. And Naasson begat Salmon. And Salmon begat Boaz. And Obed begat Obed. And Obed begat Jesse. And Jesse begat David. How many names are there? There's 10. It's the 10th generation. The Lord's just really putting emphasis on David being the rightful king for the nation of Israel. So the kinsman redeemer, as we mentioned last week, he had to be near kin. And this is a picture of Christ who took on the seed of Abraham. He had to be willing to redeem, which Christ was, because Christ loved and gave his life. He had to be able to redeem, and Christ was able to because he was sinless. But then also, the kinsman redeemer had to assume all the obligations. He became responsible now for all the obligations associated with the land, raising up seed, and this is exactly what Jesus did. He has assumed all the obligations for us. Now, because of Boaz's redemption, here's your next blank. Naomi has returned to the land, and he, Boaz, has a Gentile bride. Now, how could a good Jewish man marry a Gentile bride? This is something that's forbidden in the law. But how could he do that? Well, Boaz's mother is Rahab the harlot. You get that from Matthew chapter 1 and verse 5. And this is really interesting, and this is where you really see the parallel of Israel with Naomi being a picture of Israel, Ruth being a picture of the church, and Boaz being a type of Christ. In order to bring Ruth to Boaz, Naomi had to be exiled from her land. It wasn't legal for a Jew to marry a Moabite, and here we see that what the law could not do, grace did. God allowed that and worked through that whole situation. Ruth does not replace Naomi. Ruth learns of Boaz's ways through Naomi, but Naomi meets Boaz through Ruth. That's really an interesting circumstance. And no matter how much Boaz loved Ruth, he had to wait for her to move. And Boaz, not Ruth, is the one who confronts the near kinsman, a picture of the law, and that's exactly what Christ did for us in satisfying the law. Anybody have any questions on any of that? I know that's really like drinking out of a fire hydrant. Okay, let's go ahead and pray, and we'll be dismissed. Father, thank you for this time that you've given to us. Lord, thank you for your goodness to us and your faithfulness. Pray that you would bless now as we go our separate ways. Thank you for our time together today. In Jesus' name, amen.